Illinois is where we got it. Okay, now I got to push something here. Okay. And so we are originally from Barrington, Illinois, which is pretty much the background. Barrington is a small town, and I'm from the Midwest. And so that is where, the setting kind of came from. I used a small rural town in Indiana, which I, of course, made up. But I'm originally from the Midwest. We've only been down here in Florida for 4 years. I don't know if I'm going to ever get used to the heat down here. It was like 96 degrees today. You couldn't even go outside and breathe. Oh, anyways, so Bones Under the Ice is it's my first published novel. I've got several novels collecting dust on a shelf here, which I think many authors do. So I started, I was a crossing guard right around 2006, anywhere up to about 2015. And I was at a ladies' night out, and I was telling my friends, some of these stories that these kids, they come through and they're so goofy sometimes, and they just tell you all these stories. And she said to me, Marianne, you really ought to write those down. And so I did. I started writing them down, and that led to, what else can I write? And so then I thought, well, what do I like to read? And I have been an Agatha Christie fan. You can go all the way back to, well, Agatha's pretty kind of old, but Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, Trixie Belden, then more modern, Nora Roberts, Nelson DeMille, James Patterson. They're all my favorites. I love a good whodunit. And so that's what I decided to write, is a whodunit. And so that's where I started. And like I said, the first couple, not good. Not good. So they're sitting on the shelf here. So that's where I got started writing, was really a suggestion from one of my very close friends. And so 2 months or so ago in April, we went back to Barrington, and we had a book launch party. And she was there, and a whole bunch of my friends. And my son said to me, Mom, I have never seen you cry so much. And I've never heard that squeal of delight in your voice like that before. And I said, John, this is just such a great day. Dreams really do come true. Never, ever did I ever expect to be a published author. It's just one of those dreams that was out there. And here I am. First book. And this Friday, I have to submit book number 2 to the publisher. And so I'm like, oh, all those nerves come back. Gosh, I hope they like it. Is it good enough? All those things that go through your mind, So that's where I'm at. I'm kind of promoting this one. I'm submitting book number 2, and book number 3 is starting to kind of churn in the back of my head there. So we'll see what happens.
Wow.
Is book 2 also about Johnny Lawrence?
Yes. I call her Johnny Laurent, and it's going to be a series. And I'm going to continue the theme with her daughter, Randy, expanding upon that relationship, expanding upon her relationship with crazy old Vern. And it'll be a new, different mystery story, but you'll get to know some of the secondary characters a little bit better. A couple of her deputies, that type of a thing. I don't want to give away too much, because at this point in the novel, like book 2 that I'm submitting this Friday, they can change a lot of things. Okay, so I'm not going to say too much about book 2, but it's just about ready to go. So yes, I'm planning a series. I am planning a series.
Wow. It was very interesting that I thought in the book, this whole thing between the feud between the two families.
Lorraine, could you try to speak up? Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me better now? I think I
Yes.
gotta sit closer to the computer. I thought it was very smart the way you had the two families feud like that. In a small town, you do hear and see of things like that. It was,
All the time. All the time.
Agree, but yeah. So it was, you touched upon that. And I do remember the first time I read about this guy with the strands, and he pulled them across his head, and I remember laughing when I read that, because you picture people you've seen like that. And but it was interesting how you're trying to figure out who it is, but we really weren't given the information to figure out it was this guy Jim until later in the book, even though you met him and knew a certain amount about him. You know,
It's one of the keys is you have to introduce the killer fairly early on, but disguise him so that you, the reader, don't really know it's the killer, but you've met him already. Exactly. Exactly.
he's just a guy in the town, you know, he's a lawyer or
It's
whatever.
not the small town lawyer. Everybody's got, you know, this person exists. Okay. You've got a mental image of him, just from people, you know. Same thing with Vern, who's, you know, a farmer. You can wearing the John Deere baseball cap. Okay.
Mm, yeah.
Every farmer wears that yellow and green John Deere baseball cap. I swear to God.
Yeah, and you know, it was interesting because I got a kick out of the diner and these guys that hung out, you know, it was but it was interesting. I was kind of heartbroken when they find out and learn about her daughter that she gave up for adoption. You know, it's just that I looked at it like she had so much going on, the re-election, the murders, and now it's like it comes up to meet her daughter. You know, it wasn't the best time, you know, she kind of says that. But I like that the book ended with this girl walking into the room and you assume it's her daughter.
Yes, yes, yes. But isn't that the way life is? Okay. You got one or two things going on, then all of a sudden everything piles on top of you. Okay. Nothing ever just comes in little waves. Okay. It's always just whoosh, you know, at least that's the way it's been with me. You know, everything just gets piled on all at once. And so that was partly why I did it. You know, she had a couple tough things going on, but then we got to add one more thing in her personal life that makes her doubt herself and think about it and, you know, go back to, oh, did I do the right thing? You know, did I do the right thing? We're always questioning that, you know, we all got kids and we say, did I do the right thing? Did, you know? So yeah, but those two guys at the Skillet, Art and Dutch, I had a great uncle Dutch. His real name was Stewart. Okay. I don't know why they called him Dutch. But in my head, that's who that is. I mean, he kind of talked like that, you know, kind of moseying along and never quite finishing all his sentences. And, you know, so he's kind Uncle Dutch is, and he was kind of egg shaped. He kind of like had an egg shaped head, you know, but I see him with his, you know, John Deere baseball cap on. So he's a little bit, now, Uncle Dutch, of course, has been gone for at least 30 or 40 years. So I'm not too really worried about him, but, so, you know, so he's kind of based on, you know, but my great uncle. Who
Go
was
ahead,
a farmer.
Barbara.
When you introduced Carter, you know, you mentioned the smell of the cleaning fluid, and he was nervous, he was drinking, she didn't know he drank this much, but you know, and most of the crimes things that you watch, you know, they're always concentrating on the person wiped everything down with, you know, Clorox and bleach. So that sort of made me wonder about him in the very beginning, that maybe he was the murderer.
Good pickup. I have, if I use soft scrub with bleach, okay, my eyes start to water. I don't know, I must have some kind of reaction to it or something like that. And that's kind of what triggered, well, you know, that's why I gave that kind of to Laurent, because, you know, some of those harsh chemicals can make your eyes water. And that was more of a kind of like a personal clue, I would say, you know, that came from me, that thought, we'll see if they pick up on that, you know. So good job.
I found it a real page turner, and I love the characterizations of the teenagers, because I worked in a school with teenagers, and I just kind of felt that. And
God
then,
bless you.
and the principal too, how he, you know, everybody revered him because he was such a good person. So
Yeah.
I loved your characters.
Oh, thank you,
characterizations were
thank
wonderful.
you. My kids are in their early 30s, so them being teenagers isn't too far out of my range right now. So and their language is just so different these days too. I kind of had to go back and think, now what did they really sound like? They always use the word like, like this, like that, like this. We need the anyways, but yeah, capturing the teenagers, it was kind of fun. I did kind of like in the beginning, the two boys who found it, they're fighting over each other, wanting to see can we see the body type thing. Well, that's what 10-year-old boys do. They're curious. And then of course, Batman's better than Spider-Man. You can just hear, 10-year-old boys arguing over Batman and Spider-Man. I can hear them. So thank you. I'm glad you liked them.
Why did you decide to have Johnny's backstory be about a child she gave up for adoption 30 years earlier?
It's going to come up again in book 2. Specifically the night that she had to give her up for adoption. I'm not going to reveal too much because again, I'm sending the book off to the publisher on Friday, and we'll see what they want to do.
Yeah, well, you do mention that something had happened that made, that
Exactly.
time, and she even says at the time so many things were going on in her life, but we never learn what all those things are besides her aunt dying.
Yeah, those will come out in book 2. It's kind of a writer's trick to get you to move on and enjoy the next book and the next series. Is you want to find out what happened that night. Well, what happened that night that she had to give her daughter up for adoption. We'll like I said, I don't want to say too much. But she had a lot going on, and it was to her at the time the best thing to do for her child, even though it broke her own heart. And so in any character story, you got to put a little bit of backstory because that's what people relate to. We don't all know the sheriff of a town or anything like that, but we all know someone who has adopted someone who's had cancer, who's had a stroke, who's, all these other things, that going on. We all know someone in a difficult situation. And so that's kind of why I put the backstory in there. I try not to do too much because sometimes I think backstory can slow the whole story down. It's kind of a fine line. That's why we have editors and publishers, because if you go on too long, they'll just rip it out. Okay. Take that whole page out there, Marianne. Okay.
I hate this. I mean, no, it seems like you really studied the art of writing these books. Can you hear me?
Almost.
I was saying, like, it sounds like you really studied the art of writing books.
When I first started writing way back in 2006 or so, I didn't even know that they wrote books about writing. I happened to be in Barnes and Noble, and I walked past the section, and it was like, there's all these books on plot and character and setting. So, over the course of the next couple months, I swear to God, I bought every book. And so I have my favorites. They sit over here. And here they are. I pick them up. I got my little. This is my latest one here that I'm working on right now. See, we get. I just, I probably have 50 or 60 books on how to write books, which some some are useless and some aren't. So I read them. I take notes. The trick is taking what you've read and putting it into your writing. Okay. When they talk about, being like a plotter or a pantser, a plotter is a person who outlines everything. If you ever talk to Jeffrey Deaver, who I'm sure you all have read, he writes 150-page outline before he even starts his book.
I'm not an outline person. So
I'm a pantser.
in having met, many authors through this book club, a lot of them do write outlines. How extensively, they haven't really talked about it. But I'm not an outline person. It's
Mhm.
like,
I'm a pantster. I'll admit it right up the bat. I literally write by the seat of my pants.
do
The
it.
scene comes to me and I write it. And I'll get maybe 40, 50,000 words into a draft, and then I have to literally go back and I have to put it in sequential order, because then I'll find out where I'm missing. Okay. In my head, I know where the scene is taking place, but sometimes I don't tell you, the reader. Okay. Putting in the setting, whether it's just a phrase, come on, Marianne, you got to tell them where you're at, just little stuff like that, So I am a pantster. I do have a tendency, and I use I'm old fashioned. I use a yellow legal pad and pens. Okay. I can't
Wow.
type. Yeah, I can't type my original on the computer. It just doesn't work.
that's a lot of work.
Oh, but I like it. I like it. And so I'm keeping Staples in business. What can I say?
I like how you added Ralph, the quasi newspaper reporter, in as like her point of conflict, or one of the points of conflict.
Yes, Ralph. I'll tell you something. I have a difficulty naming things and naming people. It's just very difficult for me. And so I don't like Ralph, and I don't like the name Ralph. Okay. So that's why he's got that name. It's because I don't like that name,
I think
every town has got a snoopy little reporter, and half the town likes him and half the town doesn't like him. Okay. You pick up any little newspaper and you'll find on the opinion page, half of it, and pros and cons, back and forth and back and forth. And he's kind of a sneak too, I don't really like him.
Yeah.
I don't, and I'm not supposed to like all my characters. And so he's one I really don't like. So he doesn't show up too much in book 2, because basically they got their butts whipped in the re-election. Okay. I'll tell you right now, she wins the re-election. Did I say that in book 1? I might have.
you kind of figure it, but you don't know it yet.
Well,
Yeah, they
well,
get,
she's come to Mike Green with all of those charges against him. So I don't think he probably had to withdraw or something.
well, he didn't withdraw. They went on with the election, and then he sued her in civil court, which you will find out in book 2. And then he gets his butt handed to him again.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody likes Mike Green either.
You made that abundantly clear.
Her gunfight was incredible. I mean, how did you justify that she could go out there by herself after the killer in terrible weather? After she knew that he killed 2 people and murdered them. And then Vern was also a strange character there, because he could have helped her out in the very beginning and shot Jim, and he didn't. And I'm wondering, how that fits in the next book, because he was sort of indecisive there.
He
I think
was.
Yeah, I think he, in a way, he wanted to help her, but he was also, you didn't write it, but my thinking was he's probably apprehensive because she's, but when he hears that him confess that he killed his niece, Stephanie, that was it. That was all it took for him.
Your history, it's almost as bad as the feud. You can't kill a blood relative or anything like that. Vern comes out of his shell a little bit more in book 2. I make them begin a friendship, is what we'll say. Why did I put her out there? I don't know where. Well, you're all from New York, so you've all been through blizzards. The last blizzard that I was in was 2010, and I was at crossing guard, and I got out. It was like 2:30 in the afternoon. They'd been predicting this blizzard for days, and I got out and I'm looking around thinking, I don't see this blizzard. Well, 20 minutes later, I look off to my left and I can see the front. I can see the line of snow, and it is just coming at me. Okay. And then I looked up the hill and there's the first kid. And it was like, oh my God. 45 minutes later, I'm Frosty the Snowman. Okay. Snow, my eyebrows are just ice and my hair is ice. You could break it off. And so that's why I decided a blizzard, having lived through enough blizzards. And there's a side note. I got home from that day and I'm standing in the kitchen just dripping. And I'm hearing Tom Skilling from WGN. And he's listing the top 5 blizzards in the Chicago area. And I realized I had been alive for 4 of them. It is time to move. Okay. It is time to move. So that is where I decided we're going to use the heavy snow and the blizzard, having lived through all of that, you know, those big, fat, fluffy flakes, the wind blowing and whipping. When she went out there, I'm not positive that she was positive that he had done it. She was pretty sure he had done it, but she didn't think he was going to run. You're talking about a lawyer. You're sort of thinking, well, he'll come in and he'll try and talk his way out of it, or he'll bluff his way through it, or he'll have something else. I don't think she went out there thinking I'm going to get in a gun battle in the forest. Until he goes out the back door and, you know, he's got all his camo gear on and he's carrying his rifle and says, you know, come get me type thing. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not. How did I get all those people in the same spot in the middle of a blizzard? And then Vern, off to my right here, I have a whiteboard, and it's got the town of Fields Crossing drawn on it. And because I have to keep things straight, okay? I can't say you're north or south or east or west. I got to keep things straight. And so he's coming across the bridge, which is right where his farm is at. And he sees the light. And because his nephew had been accused of killing him, he was starting to come out of his shell saying, you know, I'm not going to let this happen again. If my gut tells me to do something, I'm going to do it. And so that's how he ended up being out in the forest also.
I thought it was interesting how Johnny would go home and early in the morning or at night, she would play the cello. You know, it was like that was her therapy. You know,
Yes. I played violin growing up. So I decided, well, she can't play the violin. I always wanted to play the cello. So that's why I made her play the cello. Okay. There's little bits of me in there.
There's a lot of you in there.
Yeah,
I
could be.
I can hear the sheriff as you're talking about the book.
You.
Yeah. I mean, but you do, I mean, you know, this Johnny Laurent is a very likable character. She's very honest and honorable. You know, and I think she's also, I read the questions that were written in the back of the book before I logged in.
Sorry about that.
And that's okay. One of the questions was, you know, about the fact that she was a female sheriff, which you know, to be honest, I've lived a lot of places, but one place I haven't lived is the Midwest. So I don't really know how they treat women that's a position that's usually a male role, you know?
It is. It truly is. There aren't a whole lot. I actually looked up that statistic. I don't remember what it was. Something like out of the 3,000 sheriffs in the United States, only 1% are women. The top cop is only 1% is women. So it's not. But when I was starting to think about writing the book, I was like, I'm tired of men being the lead role. That's kind of, you know, I'm tired of the drunk cop. I'm tired of the cop who's on narcotics. I'm tired of the cop who beats his wife. You know, I'm tired of all these damaged cops. You know what I mean? And so I wanted something different. So that's why I went with a female. But on the same token, everybody carries baggage. Okay. So what baggage does Johnny Laurent carry that men don't? And so the first thing that popped in my head was, we have babies. Okay. That's where the idea of adoption came from, because
That was a
okay.
good idea.
Yeah, that's where that came from. Because I did, and I didn't want somebody who was in their 30s. Okay, I really wanted someone who was, you know, closer to my age, you know, mid-50s type thing, been around the block a time or two. You know, we didn't get here without our own battle scars, and so she's got her battle scars too.
And I thought it interesting that you didn't give her a love interest. That's
Exactly.
because that's very, very common.
It is common, and I didn't even consider it yet. I'm thinking down the road, and I'm thinking maybe crazy old Vern, but I'm not sure. Okay. What happens down the road? Okay.
I thought it was going to be Caleb first.
The
Surprise us.
What made you introduce about the windmill farms? I found that interesting too.
If you actually drive in Indiana, north-south on I-65, up by the Gary, Indiana area, there are windmill farms on both sides of the road. They stretch for miles and miles and miles, you know, it's the prairie. There is nothing to stop the wind out there. And so when I originally thought of this book, I was thinking more of like a Romeo and Juliet type thing, you know, with the family feud. But I abandoned that because the kids are they were too young. You know, teenagers don't care about windmill farms. Okay, they don't. Okay, so that would not work. But if you drive up and down north and south on 65, there the windmill farms are huge, and I've seen those great big, the long, the arms, you know, they hang off the end of a semi, you know, another 10 feet or so, and they're on the highway. And so then when I was telling my daughter, she said, well, you know, Mom, one of her girlfriends from college, I can't remember her name, her husband drives a fuel truck to deliver diesel fuel to the machinery that builds the windmill farms. And so
Where do they build the windmills?
it's unbelievable. He sent me pictures. Kyle is his name. He sent me pictures, and you can see this little itty bitty person next to this, you know, great big old, you know, and part of the debate about the windmill farms is that how much fuel are you going to use to create them, and fossil fuels you're going to use, and emissions you're putting into the air. How much does that put into the air versus what are you going to get out of the windmill farm? You know, that's really, that's kind of the controversy in the Midwest right now as to whether wind energy is really worth it, because it takes so much fossil fuel to even build these windmill farms.
That's interesting. I didn't know that, but I lived in California in the 80s, and I will tell you something. There's a lot of farms in California, and when we used to drive from San Francisco to LA inland, where all the farms are too, because when we were in a rush to get LA and we didn't do the scenic route, there's so many windmill farms in the 80s. But you know what? I'll tell you something. Our utility costs were nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. And then moving back to New York years later, it was like, this is a crime. It's like, where's the gun when you open the envelope in New York, you know? And now, living here years, it's like, oh, the little utility bills, but it's a different world. It's a different thinking. I mean, other things are very expensive in California, like to own a car or real estate, but certainly not utilities.
Well, yeah, you're right on the ocean there, and you're breathing there all the time. So windmill farms in California make perfect sense to me, and same along the Atlantic coast. Okay, they're fighting one up in Nantucket right now because they don't want windmill farms out there because of the tourist type thing. Windmill farms along the coast, I good thing, but Indiana.
Yeah, we have one right over in Long Beach in our area. They're fighting the windmill.
Yeah, that everybody, they want the energy, but they want it's called NIMBY, not in my backyard. Okay, everybody wants to get the benefits of it, but nobody wants to live next door to it.
But I wasn't aware of the damage to the soil and the surrounding area that these windmills do, because what's strange is most of the windmill farms I saw in California were in towns, like you'd be driving past towns with all farms, then regular farms, then you'd be driving and all of a sudden it seemed like miles of just windmill farms. And then you're back to the farms. So I guess they allotted the area, at least, they weren't mixing windmill farms with farms.
Exactly. Well, that is what's happening out in Indiana, is what you're getting, windmill farms right next to where you are planting your corn and your soybeans and your cattle are grazing. And the farmers are saying that the windmills are affecting the amount of milk production. And but how do you prove that? Okay, so those are the farmers who are against it. And then you've got those who say, well, we're providing a cheaper source of fuel, we're saving the planet. So you got both sides going. And like I said, I think on the coast, windmill all day long, but in the middle of Indiana, I think you got to look back and forth and weigh the pros and cons. And anyway, that will become apparent in, hopefully, fingers crossed, in book 3. We'll see.
So did you have an agent then? Because I mean, most people who get a book, they don't have a plan for 3 books.
Yes, I was the biggest thing these days is you have to have an agent. If you're going to be traditionally published, you know, I have a publisher down here, Ocean View Publishing. I think they're in Tampa. You have to have an agent. Agents have now become kind of like the gatekeepers, I would say. Before, it used to be editors, and you would send your manuscript to an editor, or first 10 pages, whatever they wanted on their website. But now the agents do that, and they kind of are doing the screening. So the first thing you have to do is, if you want to be traditionally published, you have to get an agent, and that takes forever. You have to write what's called a query letter, and just learning how to write that letter is just there's books on how to write that letter. There's books on it. So it took me probably at least a year to get an agent. But I would say when I got the agent, we went through the book. She had a bunch of suggestions. We fixed it. We tightened it up. And after she sent it out in January of 2021. And 6 weeks later, I had 3 or 4 publishers asked to read the whole thing, which was just fabulous. And then Ocean View offered me a 2-book contract with the option for the 3rd book. And so here I am. So it's not, the traditional route is not the easiest. It's the most time consuming, but and writing a novel is hard enough. There is no way I can design a cover, and there's just so many things into it that I don't want to deal with. I don't want to do it, and I can't. You know, I'm not a graphic artist. I couldn't possibly have designed that cover. I don't want to have to, you know, get my own publishing rights. I give a lot of credit to, there we go. Thank you. I give a lot of credit to these indie authors who are self-published. The amount of work that they go through to sell maybe 100 copies, you know, I give them a lot of credit. It's not a path I could have traveled, but could not do that one.
Funny, because I went to a design school, and like the first year, one of the assignments everybody gets is designing a book cover.
So what?
Is designing a book cover.
Oh, shoot me.
You know,
Stick figures. That's all I can draw.
you could have art students design one for you.
So many different pieces,
Yeah.
so that's not for me. So I don't need control over every aspect of the process. I really don't. Just want to write.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to write.
Now, let me ask you something. You said you write everything with a legal pad. And then do you type it up, or do you have someone type it up?
Oh no, I type it up. Like, for, you know, here's my legal pads. Right there. I write it out, then I leave it, and the next day then I type it into the computer, which then will trigger another scene, which then I write out, and then the next day I type into the computer. It's kind of like a loop, you know. That's the way I keep going. It keeps spurring, you know, the juices, the creative mind. I do like to write, don't ever read my handwriting because I use a lot of, abbreviations, but that's the way I do it.
Sounds like that's your creative process.
I think it is. I think it is.
I have a question for you. When I mentioned that there was questions in the book, did you write those questions or did your editor write them?
I wrote the initial ones. This was something I didn't know I was going to have to do, was write questions for book clubs. And so it came as kind of a surprise. And I was like, I don't know what to say. And so I wrote like 10 or 15 of them, and then I gave them to the publisher, and I think they polished them up is what I think they did.
Well, the first question I thought was very good. Did you think there was a single killer of the 2 murder victims in the small Indiana community? Why or why not? And I thought about that while I was reading the book. It's not like I had read the question.
Ah,
And they
okay.
said to me, like when she was when you're at the point in the book where she has different evidence for someone killing Bob than Stephanie, because you haven't linked yet this whole, I kept saying to myself, she was scanning documents in the government office, but I I didn't at that point think it was Jim. I didn't even think about him, but my gut said to me, no, it's not 2 people. This little town, they don't even have a murder. They got 2 murders in this short time, and they're both killed out in the cold.
Cold.
Kind of like designed for you to, it's like the murderer has an MO already that oh, maybe they just froze to death.
Yeah. Yeah. I struggled with those questions. I'm certain that for book 2, I'm going to have to write a bunch more questions, and I'm kind of dreading it already.
But, actually you could get the questions from someone you give the transcript to read. They would be able to come up with questions for you.
That's a good idea. I'm going to ask my sister to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I thought it was very creative. I love the fact that there was this footprint with the shoes on the back of Bob. I said to myself, really? I said, you knew it was a man right away because it was like a size 13. And it's like, who's going to be wearing fancy shoes? That's when I said to myself, the only one it could be is this guy, Jim, the lawyer.
I'll be the lawyer. Who's got the fancy boots and the fancy shoes? Exactly. Who spent $600 for a pair of Thomas Crown shoes? Please. Yeah, good.
That was comical.
I don't know. Maybe I made it too obvious. I don't know.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting when at the first crime scene with Stephanie, how she saw a footprint and it was going to be gone, and she made a point of taking a picture. She didn't know if the picture was going to come out good enough, but it was something to go by. You could get an idea of a size foot and whatnot, but then that wasn't really looked into as much as maybe, you could have said, well, I guess you didn't want to give away, the fact that it definitely was a man right away or things like that.
Yeah. Just, you have to do some research, and it's very difficult to get a footprint out of snow. Okay. You have to make a mold.
Yeah,
And that's assuming that you've got the stuff in the car to make the mold before the next snowstorm comes and fills the print in. That I found out from just doing my research. Taking footprints in snow is very difficult.
But I think also, wasn't the snow blowing that she knew the footprint image was even going to be gone quickly?
It was going to disappear. Yeah,
it was melting or something like that.
Exactly. It was going to be gone. It was going to be quick. It's Indiana. That snow just keeps blowing right across the prairie there.
That's funny. So I guess a lot goes on in Indiana.
Does anyone have any other questions? I mean, it's just like I always find it fascinating. Every author that comes to visit, it's just so different. They have such a different perspective about how they're writing. You sound so down to earth.
Yeah,
I am very down to earth. I'm from the Midwest. We are common folk.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's like you're like a regular person, like somebody we would all know, you know?
Thank
And
you.
you
Thank you.
I mean, that's fabulous, I give you a
Thank
lot.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for reading it too. I do appreciate it.
Well, that's Mamie, she picks the book. She picks great books.
Yes,
Good job.
Yeah, I would never have read any of these books, And now I can't go back to the type of books I used to read. They're so boring compared to my book club books.
The book club books are the best, aren't they?
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Well, because I really don't know what it's going to be about. She knows, but I don't know. Right.
Well, I have to tell you, we're going to be doing a nonfiction next, so it'll be totally different.
Wow.
I think that I see hundreds of books go by, and sometimes I just like pick and choose. I'm sure there's going to be something that's going to be a dud sooner or later, but it's 1 month's worth of reading or whatever.
Yeah.
What are you doing next?
The next book we're going to be doing is called Walking with Gorillas. It's about an African wildlife conservationist.
Walking with gorillas. Ooh,
Yes.
I like that.
She's going to be doing the Zoom. She lives in Uganda.
Oh, I lived in
Wow.
Kenya for 3 years.
Yes, so this will be
It's a beautiful
it'll
place.
be different because it's a lot of maybe too factual, but I thought it was such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
That try it, read what you can, and it'll be great to hear from her.
Oh,
So that book will be ready sometime next week, and I have to figure out. She knows the time, but I have no idea what it's going to be for her. Like, will she have to do it in the middle of the night? I don't know.
Time zones.
Yes.
yeah, the time zones is going to
Yes.
be.
So you,
Yeah.
you were in Uganda, Lorraine?
No, I lived in Kenya. I lived in Nairobi for 3 years.
So that's
beautiful
it's that
part
part of the world. So
Yeah, well, in Uganda, I think it's true of Kenya, but like I lived in Kenya and Uganda is right by it, and we knew a guy who was living in Kampala, Uganda. That's the capital, and he would come a couple of times a year and stay with us for like a long weekend, and but there's an expression in Uganda. They say you spit and it grows. That's how fertile the soil is. It's also like that in Kenya.
Spit and it grows. Wow.
The soil is so fertile. The fruits, the vegetables, the flowers, unbelievable. It's just, but I lived in Nairobi, and Nairobi is more desirable because you're almost 6,000 feet above sea level. So the weather is very different than the rest of Kenya or Uganda because it doesn't get as hot. I mean, the summer there is, the hottest time is January, and there's no heating system in Kenya. In our house, we had a fireplace, and in the winter, like July, August, you start the fire at 4 o'clock every day, and it warms up the whole house.
wow.
It really start to get cool to like 4:35. But the temperature doesn't the coldest it gets is like 32 degrees. It doesn't get that cold. But the rest of Kenya is not like that. That's Nairobi. Nairobi is it's a very desirable place to live. And the Kenyan people are wonderful, warm, friendly people. I mean, they have their own things between tribes and jealousy and stuff. That's the only thing. But for the, like my second gardener, my house girl was like, she was that nice to him. And I said, how come you don't like him? So she's like, oh, he's a Lu, So he was from the Lu tribe. That's like saying, your grandparent or your great grandparent is from Italy or something like that. I don't like Italians. It's like that. Yeah. And that's how they are with the tribes with each, and I loved him, and she knew it. She knew it.
Wow. Well,
Wow.
so you're gonna be, I know that you're gonna be interested in this book then.
Yeah, and I used to go on safari a couple of weekends a month.
Wow.
For years.
So
Yeah.
anyways, thank you, Mary Ann, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so sorry that I can't be on screen. I have to get another camera. It's just like, this is really weird.
Well, did you click on and test the video before you signed in? This is the newest Zoom.
Lorraine, this is my third Zoom today. I was on camera up until 7:15. And since something happened. So this is just the weirdest thing. I've been on, you've seen me on camera all this time. I've never had a problem. So I have another camera at home, so I'm gonna have to bring that. This is the first time this has ever happened, but I was on 3 different Zooms today and I was fine.
Well, you know what? It actually, to solve the problem for something like that, when you first sign in, if you see that, just log out and re-sign in again.
Yeah, I'll try that. I'm gonna bring my other camera, and then, but I said I didn't want to lose everybody, so that's why I didn't want to log out and log in again.
Well, we see the library, so you
Right, and you all know what I look like, so
Yeah.
it was more important that you saw Mary Ann, because we only saw her
So
picture.
much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and I'll have my librarian edits this and we'll put it up on YouTube. It's just gonna be weird that I'm not there, but oh,
Thank you so much, folks. Have a great evening.
Thank
Happy
you.
4th of
for coming.
July.
Mary Ann,
Sure.
we look forward
okay.
to the sequel.
Thank you.
Have a good holiday.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.